I guess my thoughts, following on from what Catherine alluded to earlier, is thinking about notions of time. Time is a crucial resource that we all have far too little of, and the way in which our working lives structure the kind of time we have for care, the time we might, Joan talked about this idea of a caring democracy, that we all ideally should be able to take part in both the decision making around how care happens, who should be responsible for that care, how it's shared, really higher level questions as a society moving forward, how we think about care needs and how care is provided and sourced. But when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about it through the lens of the families who are involved in the research that I'm about to embark on with colleagues I've mentioned already, who are families working in non-standard hours, particularly low-income families, where the majority of non-standard work at the moment is families who are on low-wage income. It's increasingly precarious. It's shift. In the last decade, shift night work has increased twice as much for women as their male counterparts in New Zealand. And by the recent statistics, about 1 in 3 workers are involved in some kind of non-standard labour. So I was thinking about the ways in which we might try and claim back some unburdened time from that encroaching nature of the sort of work environment that we're increasingly involved in, the kind of habitualization we have to a 24/7 economy now. When we talk about that kind of nothing's out of bounds in some ways in terms of our demands, and how we might police that. We're told as individuals we're supposed to be able to police that, but we're increasingly lacking the autonomy or the agency to do that for all sorts of reasons. And so the notion of time for me seems to be something we need to try and, contest, repoliticize. I was thinking about the way in which at the turn of the 20th century, we fought hard for the 8-hour working day and the kind of advocacy that went into claiming those kinds of rights around time and autonomy. The proliferation of the idea of leisure time as something that was democratized in a way that hadn't been until that point, that everyone had the right to have these periods of unburdened time, but it seems to have kind of slipped from our understandings. And it's not just for necessarily, it's particularly pointed for the kinds of families in the study that I'm involved in. But I think it impacts right across the board. And I think the kind of work from home movement, although it's supposed to give us greater agency about how we structure our days and our responsibilities, in fact, with the kind of cost of living rises, what we're seeing is families cutting things like after school care and childcare, trying to do everything in the sort of working day. So that, they've got these images in the media of women with their laptops and kids just beside them, looking for their afternoon tea or whatever it is. So, we're led to believe we have this agency over our time and that we're able to structure time to do care, but actually, in reality, how feasible is that for most of us going forward? So notions of time were sort of really prominent in my thoughts today as I was listening to Joan. And the other thing that struck me when I was thinking about it, maybe from a sort of geographer's perspective, is the kind of materialities of the spaces in which we inhabit and the way in which that infuses notions of care. So, I think about the ways, and I was struck by a colleague's comment recently who started at Massey, and this might be a reflection badly of Massey, but she talked, we'll go with it anyway. She said that, I feel like the buildings are really run down and I just don't feel like we're loved. I just don't feel like the institution cares for us. Don't record this, Diana, thanks very much. I'm on thin ice. And it really struck me as I never thought about it. And she was right. I was looking really tired. And, in what ways do the sort of materialities of the environments we inhabit also express and make conditions for care to happen? It might be, the aged care sector where we might go into some of those providers and services and feel like they're stark, cold, they're unloved, they're not loving, they're not caring environments. I see through the eyes of a sort of early childhood education and childcare, which is where I do a lot of my previous work, particularly as we sort of bring in those different kinds of values, profit making being the key one in many ways, those, the materialities of how care gets facilitated in many ways through the built environment. And the other thing that struck me recently was I'm seeing a lot of these kind of city initiatives about caring cities, and I wondered about the scale at which we kind of invest our time and energy to try and reframe care. It might be a planning initiative where people are trying to reframe care as a caring city. I follow a lot of media around playful cities, in terms of making cities more amenable to children and how we make it more interactive and engaging, not just the kind of utilitarian, adult-centric spaces that we necessarily have to have some of, but how do we open up those spaces in ways that make life and well-being better for all kinds of citizens who might inhabit those spaces. So I just wondered about, the materialities, the spaces, and the levels at which we pitch our advocacy for change, in a sense. Sorry, there are things I was thinking of today.